Some marriages shatter like a blade, leaving scars that never heal. Her husband once abandoned Naomi Carter while she was carrying his child, stripped of both honor and hope. But from those ashes, she rose, turning her intellect into a weapon, turning love into her anchor. 5 years later, the man who once treated her like garbage was forced to bow his head as he watched her become a symbol of power. This is not just a story of revenge. It is a hymn to justice, rebirth, and the strength of a woman who dared to believe in her worth. The light from the crystal chandelier spilled down onto the polished marble floor, breaking into dazzling rays that felt as cold and sharp as blades. Inside the vast Whitmore mansion on the outskirts of Houston, Naomi Carter stood motionless in the foyer, one hand holding her 6-month pregnant belly, the other trembling as it clutched the stack of divorce papers just shoved into her face. Those white pages were as merciless as a death warrant, marking the end of a marriage she once believed would last forever. "Sign it." Preston Whitmore III's voice came from behind the mahogany desk, steady, cold, as if he were closing a business deal. He wore a perfectly tailored ash-gray suit, a navy tie knotted tight, his face sculpted as if made for campaign photos. He radiated the confidence of a man born into silk sheets, used to being obeyed. But that indifferent tone made Naomi feel she was no longer human, only a property to be liquidated quickly. 30 minutes earlier, Naomi had climbed the stairs and witnessed the sight that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Preston, her husband, was in bed with Madeline Harrington, her blonde hair sprawled across silk pillows, her lips curled in a mocking smirk. The sheets were wrinkled, a wine glass, half empty on the nightstand, every detail a brazen confession of betrayal. Naomi had stood frozen, as if every drop of blood had been drained from her body. 6 months pregnant, she was heavy, sleepless, often exhausted, and Preston had sought pleasure in another woman's arms. Now, in the grand living room, he showed no regret. "The lawyer is waiting. The sooner you sign, the better for both of us." Preston didn't look at her, his eyes glued to his phone, fingers swiping across the screen as if ending a marriage was no more important than sending a business email. Naomi drew a deep breath. Do you ever think about the baby?" Her voice was hoarse, trembling, yet clinging to a shred of fragile hope. Preston finally looked up, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "The baby? Yours, not mine. I won't tie myself to a mistake, especially with the gardener's daughter." He pressed that last word like a freezing blade. The word slashed into Naomi's memory. Her father had once been the Whitmore's gardener. When she and Preston met at Stanford, she had believed love could bridge class. She had given up a full MBA scholarship to stand behind him, help build his city council campaign, and refine the family company's investment strategies. She thought they were a team. Now, all of it was an illusion. A female voice floated from the winding staircase behind them. "Oh, Preston, I thought you'd already taken care of this." Madeline Harrington descended slowly, wearing only one of Preston's oversized white shirts. On her finger gleamed an engagement ring, its diamond large enough to swallow the room's light. She leaned against Preston's shoulder, red lips curved in a victorious smile. "Naomi, darling, you're still here. I thought you'd figured out your place by now." Naomi could no longer hold back, tears spilling over. "I sacrificed my career, my youth for you." Her voice cracked, yet her eyes blazed with fury as she faced Preston. "I saved your family from bankruptcy with the algorithms I designed. You know my ability. And now you deny everything?" Preston's brow furrowed, his face twisted in disdain. "Stop flattering yourself. You were nothing but a photo op my father thought might win black votes. You were the Whitmore's charity project, and now the project is over." A chill raced down Naomi's spine. The man who once whispered forever into her ear, who once held her through sleepless nights, now stripped away every mask, revealing his true self, arrogant, selfish, ruthless. Madeline giggled. "Naomi, poor thing. Did you really think Preston would build a future with a girl from nothing? He needs someone of his own class. You are not." That laugh grated like shards of broken glass. Preston walked to the fireplace, picked up their wedding photo framed in crystal, and tossed it into the flames. The picture curled and warped, their once smiling faces collapsing into ash. He looked at Naomi with indifference. "Sign. Don't drag this out." Naomi clutched her belly, tears streaming. "And the baby? The baby has nothing to do with me. The lawyer handled everything. You won't get a cent. The prenup was clear. You should consider yourself lucky you still keep your Carter name." Preston smirked, dripping contempt. The air in the room pressed down like a crushing weight. Yet deep inside, a spark flickered to life. Naomi lifted her head, forcing herself not to collapse. With a trembling hand, she signed. Every stroke carved pain into her heart, but she knew this was the moment she refused to remain a victim. She slid the papers back across the table. "There. Happy now?" Preston exhaled, relieved, as though a burden had been lifted. "Good. My people will pack your things. You can go anywhere, as long as it's not here." Naomi turned toward the door, each step heavy, like treading on sharp stones. Before leaving, she glanced back one last time at the mansion that had once been her home, where she had laughed with Preston on breezy afternoons. Now it was nothing but a cold house of betrayal. "You will regret this," Naomi whispered, voice ragged yet steady. "One day you'll know what you've lost, and by then, it'll be too late." The wooden door slammed shut behind her, leaving Preston and Madeline in the flickering firelight. Outside, the Houston night stretched cold and vast, and Naomi, hand on her belly, walked into the darkness of a new life. She had nothing but the child inside her, yet within her chest, a fire of resolve had begun to burn. The night wind swept in, damp and biting, as Naomi passed through the towering iron gates of the Whitmore estate. The heavy clang of metal closing behind her echoed like a complete stop. The road to the main street lay deserted, filled only with the chirp of insects in the dark and the dim yellow glow of scattered lamps. Naomi pulled her thin coat tighter, her palm pressed against her swollen stomach, feeling the faint kick of her child. "I'm here, baby," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but in it was a new certainty. The unborn child had already become her only reason to stand tall. A taxi stopped when she raised her hand. The driver, a middle-aged man, glanced at her red-rimmed eyes and swollen belly but said nothing. He only gave a slight nod and switched on the meter. Naomi slid into the back seat, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Tears streamed down, soaking her collar. But this time, she did not hide them. She let herself cry, pouring out all the pain. Houston's skyscrapers rose in the night outside the window, majestic yet distant. This was the city where men like Preston sat in closed rooms, believing they were born to dictate others' fates. The town where people like her had to work 3 times as hard to be acknowledged, only to be despised for their origins. In that moment, Naomi grasped a brutal truth. If she wanted to survive, she could not rely on pity. Preston had taught her that in the cruelest way. The cab pulled up to the small apartment she had kept since before marriage, tucked in a modest neighborhood on the city's west side. Naomi stepped out, thanked the driver, then slowly climbed the stairs. The one-bedroom unit, with peeling paint and rattling windows, became her reluctant refuge. Yet when the door closed behind her, she felt a weight lift. No Preston, no insults, only her and the baby. She sat on the worn bed, laying the divorce papers on the table beside her old laptop, the only tool connecting her to Stanford. She opened it, the screen glowing, reflecting a haggard face, but eyes slowly rekindling. The desktop still held files of algorithms she had once designed, ideas Preston had dismissed as meaningless games. But Naomi knew their worth. Those very formulas had saved the Whitmore Company from ruin. Preston could erase her name from his life, but he could not erase her intellect and resilience. Naomi opened a file, her trembling fingers moving across the keyboard. Lines of code appeared, familiar as a heartbeat. Tonight, amid grief and loss, she rediscovered what remained untouched, her mind and passion. She whispered to herself, "I will not be buried. I can't." In the hall, slow footsteps approached. It was Mrs. Thompson, her elderly neighbor. A gentle knock, her voice, "Naomi, you're home? Oh dear, I heard you crying from down the hall." Naomi hesitated, then opened the door. Mrs. Thompson stood there in an old floral nightgown, holding a cup of warm milk. Her aged eyes shone with the compassion Naomi had found nowhere else. One look was enough to melt every layer of Naomi's defenses. "Are you all right, child?" she asked softly. Naomi broke down, burying her face in the woman's shoulder. I lost everything, Mrs. Thompson wrapped her arms around her, patting her back. "No, you haven't. You still have the baby. And you still have yourself. Don't forget you are stronger than you think." Those words felt like a lifeline. Naomi sipped the warm milk, the heat easing the stress-tight knots in her belly. Deep down, she knew the woman was right. She could not let Preston define her worth. That night, Naomi did not sleep. She sat by the window, gazing at the city lights. The image of Preston and Madeline, tangled together, was stained on her chest. But mingled with pain was clarity. Preston might have money and power, but he would never possess her intellect and will. One day, he would face that truth. Naomi placed a hand on her belly. "My love, I promise you," she whispered, eyes fixed on the night. "I will give you a good life. We will beg from no one. I will rebuild from the ground up. And I will never let anyone look down on you." The clock's ticking echoed steadily through the quiet apartment, each beat like a countdown to the day Naomi would rise again. Stronger, brighter. Outside, Houston slept, unaware that a woman newly cast aside had begun a journey that would change everything. From this night forward, Naomi Carter was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, and deep inside, a warrior had awakened. 3 years after that fateful night, Houston still blazed with the light of oil and technology, but Naomi Carter's life had changed completely. The cramped apartment was now replaced with one even smaller and older, chosen only because the rent was cheap and it was close to the public preschool where her daughter, Lila, attended. Naomi no longer walked on polished marble floors, but along cracked concrete hallways where people hung their laundry outside their doors and children ran barefoot through rain puddles. Now Naomi worked as a waitress at a fancy Italian restaurant downtown, while also freelancing part-time for a small tech startup, writing bits of code on a project basis. After Lila fell asleep at night, Naomi switched on her desk lamp, opened her laptop, and continued the online MBA program she struggled to maintain. Life spun in a cycle of 18-hour workdays, online classes, and sleepless nights. Some evenings, Naomi nearly collapsed at the kitchen table, her head swimming, eyes burning. But then Lila, with her tight curls and star-bright eyes, would run to hug her legs, proudly holding up a messy drawing. "Mama, I drew us. This is the Houston skyline," like outside the window. The clumsy lines, filled with love, made Naomi's throat tighten. In that moment, all exhaustion dissolved, leaving only determination. Their neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, became the grandmother neither Naomi nor Lila had ever known. Each night, Naomi worked late shifts. Mrs. Thompson took Lila in, fed her dinner, read her stories, and lulled her to sleep with old fairy tales. "You must keep your spirit strong," she often said, "because your mind is the one thing no one can steal." Naomi was so grateful that many nights, tears spilled silently down her cheeks. That simple warmth was what kept her standing. One Friday evening, the restaurant buzzed with a packed crowd. Glasses clinked, and laughter from wealthy guests filled the air. Naomi, dressed in her black uniform and fraying white shirt, maneuvered gracefully between tables, balancing heavy trays of wine. She had learned how to smile and soften her voice politely even when customers ignored her or threw out condescending remarks. Table 12 was especially loud that night. A group of middle-aged men in sharp suits debated heatedly. Naomi caught snatches of familiar words: neural networks, unsupervised learning, adaptive algorithms. Her ears pricked instantly. These were not dinner-table buzzwords. This was her language she had only whispered to her laptop in the dead of night for the past 3 years. She placed the wine bottle on the table, ready to step back, but the words tumbled out before she could stop herself. "Excuse me, but if you're discussing unsupervised learning, perhaps an adaptive neural network approach would be a better fit." The table fell silent. One gray-haired man laughed, his tone mocking. "Sweetheart, this is complex technical talk, not something a waitress could understand." Laughter rippled around the table. Naomi's face burned, and she was about to retreat when a firm, steady voice cut through. "Let her speak. I want to hear more." The speaker was younger than the others, mid-30s, with a lean face and sharp eyes. Ethan Rodriguez, CEO of Rodriguez Technologies, was a name Naomi had only ever read in tech news. He gestured to the empty seat beside him. Naomi hesitated. Restaurant rules forbade staff from sitting with guests, and she knew her manager would explode if he saw this. But Ethan's eyes carried no contempt, only genuine curiosity. For the first time in years, Naomi felt someone truly wanted to listen. She drew a deep breath. Then Saturday, unsupervised learning only breaks through when the system can adjust how it learns. Just like people don't learn by endless repetition, but by finding hidden patterns in chaos. Naomi grabbed a napkin, sketching circles and arrows, laying out the structure of an adaptive neural network. The years of Preston's derision, the countless nights coding alone, now poured out in a torrent of ideas. The table was silent. When Naomi finally looked up, Ethan's eyes shone bright. Not only did he understand, he followed every thread. "Yes, that's exactly what we've been searching for." He pulled a business card and scribbled his personal number on the back. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. My office. I want to hear more." Naomi held the card, her heart hammering. She couldn't believe her eyes. Part of her trembled, afraid this was a dream. But another part, the part hardened by 3 years of humiliation, felt truly seen for the first time. That night, after Lila was asleep in their tiny room, Naomi sat at the kitchen table, turning the card in her hands. Rodriguez Technologies, a name she'd only seen in glossy articles, was now knocking at her shabby apartment door. She opened her laptop, searching for more on Ethan. Born to a poor Mexican immigrant family in Detroit, he taught himself programming as a teenager and built his company from nothing. He was no Preston, the man who inherited everything. Ethan was a survivor, someone who had clawed his way up. Naomi smiled. Her smile was not laced with tears for the first time in years. Opportunity had come knocking, and this time she would not miss it. The next morning, Naomi rose earlier than usual. She woke Lila, prepared a simple breakfast of cereal and milk, then dropped her off with Mrs. Thompson. Her hand still clutched the card from last night, as if letting go would make the chance vanish. "Sweetheart, today Mama has an important meeting." Naomi kissed Lila's forehead. "Stay with Mrs. Thompson and be good." Lila's eyes sparkled. "Mama, are you going to make magic?" Naomi laughed softly. "Yes, a little magic." On her way downtown, Naomi's heart pounded. She borrowed Mrs. Thompson's old suit jacket and adjusted a dress to fit her post-pregnancy body. Her heels were also borrowed, slightly loose but formal enough. Each step across the pavement was a battle against her doubt. "Do I deserve this? I'm just a single mom, waiting tables to get by." The Rodriguez Technologies building loomed ahead, steel and glass gleaming in the heart of Houston. Naomi drew a deep breath and stepped through the revolving doors. A spacious lobby, sharp-dressed staff, and LED screens scrolling the words, "Innovation with Purpose." The slogan tightened something in her chest. She whispered to herself, "Maybe this is where I belong." Ethan was already waiting when the elevator doors opened on the 15th floor. No air of distance, just a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, a sincere smile. "Naomi, thank you for coming." The small conference room, all glass walls overlooking the city. Ethan poured her coffee himself, a simple gesture, yet enough to make Naomi feel like a respected guest, not someone beneath him. "Tell me everything," Ethan said. "The research you've done, the ideas you think no one wanted to hear." Naomi opened her laptop, hands trembling, then began. She spoke about algorithms with unrestrained passion for the first time in years. She explained how a system could adjust its structure, learn from chaotic data, and propose improvements humans had never imagined. Ethan listened intently, asking questions not to test her, but to build on her ideas, to co-create. Naomi's heart raced, but now with exhilaration, not fear. When she finished, Ethan was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Naomi, what you just described is the missing piece my team has been chasing for 3 years. You're not only brilliant, you have vision." He slid a draft contract across the table. "I want you to join us. Position: Director of Innovation. You'll lead your own team." Naomi froze. You're serious?" Don't diminish yourself," Ethan cut in, firm. "You survived what would have destroyed anyone else. You have resilience and intellect. That's exactly what I need in a partner, not just an employee." Naomi bit her lip, eyes stinging. Preston's voice echoed in her mind. "You're just the gardener's daughter." But now, Ethan's unwavering faith erased it all, replacing it with something she hadn't felt in years: belief. "Yes," she whispered. "I accept." From that day forward, Naomi's life turned a new page. At first, she still worked part-time at the restaurant to cover costs, but gradually, her salary at Rodriguez Technologies lifted the burden. The shabby apartment gave way to a cleaner home, closer to a better school for Lila. Every evening, when Naomi came home, Lila would dash to the door. "Mama, did you invent something new today?" Naomi would laugh, scoop her up, and tell little stories about robots, data, and how even computers could learn. Lila's eyes lit up, her tiny imagination painting entire galaxies. Ethan often stopped by their apartment, sometimes to discuss projects, other times bringing small gifts for Lila: a set of crayons, a book about women scientists. He never tried to act like a replacement father, but he became a steady presence in the girl's small world through patience and kindness. One evening, Lila whispered shyly to her mother, "Mama, Mr." Ethan's eyes looked like teddy bears. "They make me feel safe." Naomi smiled, her heart trembling. 3 years earlier, she had been left with nothing. Though the road ahead was long, she had regained something vital: faith. Faith in herself, in her mind, in a future where she and her daughter would never live in fear again. One night, while Naomi typed by the window, a message from Ethan flashed on her phone. "Naomi, I believe you're going to change the world, and I want to walk that journey with you." She stared at the screen, fingers hovering, then replied, "Let's start today." Outside, Houston roared on. But inside the little apartment, Naomi knew one thing for sure: the darkness of the past was behind her. A new dawn was coming, and she would not let it slip away this time. In her first months at Rodriguez Technologies, Naomi felt reborn. Her office wasn't as grand as the Whitmore family's boardroom had once been, but it was full of light and energy. On the walls, whiteboards brimmed with formulas and diagrams. Her desk was always cluttered with laptops, scratch paper, and half-empty coffee cups. To Naomi, this wasn't chaos, it was a garden where ideas grew. Ethan gave her full autonomy. "Build the team you trust," he told her. Naomi recruited fresh graduates, young engineers bursting with passion but overlooked because of their backgrounds. She saw herself in them, bright, but ignored for their origins. Under her guidance, the research group began building AI systems that exceeded expectations. One project made Naomi proud: a medical diagnostics platform for public hospitals. The system learned from millions of patient records to accurately predict disease risks. "We're not just here for profit," Naomi emphasized in a meeting. "We must save lives, especially those who can't afford private care." The room went silent, then every head nodded. Bit by bit, Rodriguez Technologies became known not only for innovation but also for social responsibility. Naomi began appearing at conferences and was quoted in tech publications. For the first time, her name was spoken with respect, not pity. But the bigger transformation was outside the office. Ethan became more present in Naomi and Lila's private world. At first, just visits to discuss projects ended in shared dinners. Then, weekend outings, where Ethan carefully roasted marshmallows for Lila while Naomi watched them laugh under the sunset. One night, when Lila fell ill with a high fever, Naomi panicked, rushing her to the ER. While she trembled, filling out forms, Ethan appeared, breathless from running straight from the office. He stayed all night, fetching water, speaking with doctors, reassuring Naomi, "You are not alone." That moment carved itself deep into Naomi's heart. Preston had never gone with her to prenatal appointments, never stayed awake for the baby. Ethan was different. He didn't need to prove anything. He showed up. One late evening, after Lila was asleep, Naomi and Ethan sat on the apartment balcony, the city buzzing below. Ethan hesitated, then said, "Naomi, I know you've been through so much. I'm not here to replace anyone, but I want to walk beside you, if you'll let me." Naomi studied him for a long time. In his eyes, she saw no pity, only respect, admiration, and a warmth she thought she'd never feel again. She nodded gently. "Ethan, I'm afraid, but maybe it's time I give myself a chance." From that moment, a new relationship began. It was not a fiery, explosive love like in novels, but a slow, steady one, built with patience over warm dinners, over mornings where Ethan dropped Lila at school so Naomi could make her meetings. And in that simplicity, Naomi found what she had always longed for, a real family. 2 years have passed since Naomi first joined Rodriguez Technologies. The company had risen into one of Houston's brightest startups. The press called Naomi the brain behind the humanitarian AI revolution, while Ethan was hailed as the founder who empowers. But in their small apartment, where sunlight streamed through curtains, Naomi didn't see herself as a symbol. She was a mother, cooking breakfast for her daughter while preparing a boardroom presentation that morning. Lila was now 6, lively, curious. She often sat beside her mother, doodling smart machines from her imagination. Once, she asked, "Mama, when I grow up, can I be a scientist like you?" Naomi hugged her, eyes misting. "You can be anything you want." Ethan's presence in their lives grew undeniable as a CEO, colleague, and man who truly wanted a family. He learned to tie Lila's hair awkwardly, watching YouTube tutorials. He patiently answered endless childish questions. Why is the sky blue? How do computers know math? Why can't fish cry? Naomi often stood quietly, watching, her chest swelling with emotions she couldn't name. One afternoon, Ethan took Naomi and Lila to the park. They sat on the grass, eating ice cream, laughing. As the sun dipped, he turned to Naomi, voice steady. "Naomi, I don't just want to walk with you to work. I want to walk with you in life. Will you marry me?" Naomi froze. Preston's ghost returned for a second. The diamond ring, the empty vows, the bitter betrayal. She trembled. But Ethan's gaze was steady, not pressing, only waiting. Naomi's voice broke. She looked at Lila, who sat with her half-eaten ice cream, eyes shining hopefully. Naomi drew a deep breath. "Ethan, yes, I will." Lila squealed joyfully, jumping up. "I'll have a daddy for real." Naomi burst into tears this time, not of despair, but of release. The wedding was simple but overflowing with love. It was not a gilded ballroom, but a small garden in the suburbs, where sunlight filtered through branches and colleagues applauded joyfully. Naomi wore a plain white dress, hair tied high, face radiant. Ethan held her hand tightly as he vowed, "I promise you will never have to fight alone again." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, applause thundered. Lila flung herself into their arms, shouting, "Now we're a family." Naomi sat by the window on their wedding night, looking at Houston's lights. Ethan wrapped her from behind, whispering, "You don't have to carry it all alone anymore. We'll carry it together." Naomi rested her head on his shoulder, her heart full of peace. In the following months, Naomi and Ethan became like two wings, supporting each other. They were inseparable partners at work, one proposing bold ideas, the other shaping execution. At home, they shared every small task: who took Lila to school, who cooked, who soothed her nightmares. Ordinary things, but to Naomi, they were what she'd never had. Every time Naomi stepped onto a stage to present, Ethan sat in the front row, eyes steady with quiet pride. And when Ethan grew tense over a significant deal, Naomi sat by his side, hand on his shoulder. "We'll get through this." They needed no flowery words, their presence was enough. Naomi understood that true love wasn't luxury banquets or grand promises. It was Ethan brewing ginger tea at midnight when she couldn't sleep. It was he listening patiently as she rambled about a new AI model, even when dinner went cold. He pored over dozens of Lila's drawings to choose the best one to frame on the wall. In those ordinary moments, Naomi realized, She had finally found where she belonged. A family, a career, and a love built on the foundation of respect and trust. One early summer morning, as golden sunlight streamed across the expansive kitchen of their new home, Naomi was doing math exercises with Lila when the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," Lila chirped, but Naomi quickly stood. She didn't want her daughter answering unexpected guests. A neatly dressed courier handed her a thick envelope at the door, the handwriting looping and ornate. Naomi hesitated. She had long since learned to be wary of anything that looked extravagant. But when her eyes landed on the words outside Mrs. Naomi Rodriguez, her chest tightened. She signed, thanked him, and closed the door. Ethan walked out of his home office, instantly catching the change in her expression. "What is it?" Naomi sat at the table and opened the envelope. Inside lay an ivory card with gleaming gold trim, the engagement of Preston Whitmore III and Madeline Harrington, to be held at the Astoria Grand Hotel, downtown Houston. Naomi's heart clenched like an old scar had been torn open. Tucked behind the card was a handwritten note. "Naomi, you should hear the good news. I hope you find a dress worthy of the dress code. Preston." The short lines, each stroke of blue ink dripping arrogance, made Naomi tremble. Blood roared in her ears. This was no invitation, it was a slap. Preston wanted her there as a comparison, to force her to witness his victory. Ethan skimmed the note, his face darkening. Shameless. You don't have to suffer another of his humiliations. Naomi was silent, her gaze fixed on the card. Anger flared, but beneath it coiled something colder, calculating. He thought he could drag her back into that old role, make her a spectacle. But he didn't know she was no longer the woman he once crushed. Ethan noticed the shift in her eyes. "What are you thinking?" Naomi looked up, lips curving into a sharp smile. "Do you remember 3 months ago when we acquired Sterling Events Management, and also Guardian Systems, the security firm?" Ethan blinked, then chuckled low. "And Astoria Grand just signed over its ownership rights to our group. God, Preston has no idea." Naomi nodded. "Exactly. He invited me to be humiliated, but handed me a golden stage instead. That night won't be his, it'll be ours." Admiration and amusement gleamed in Ethan's eyes. He stepped forward and took her hand. "Naomi, I've never seen anyone turn pain into such a weapon. But are you sure you want to face him this way? You already have everything: family, career, honor." Naomi glanced at Leela, who was coloring happily at the table. "Precisely because I have everything, I can't let him keep defining me as the abandoned woman. I'm not doing this only for myself. I'm doing it for her, for everyone who was ever dismissed like me." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then we'll prepare, and Preston will learn the hardest lesson of his life." Over the following days, Naomi and Ethan set their plan in motion. Their lawyers combed contracts to ensure every detail of the engagement party. Flowers, music, lighting was under the control of companies Naomi now commanded. Preston thought he was the powerful client, but in reality, he had handed the entire evening into her hands. Meanwhile, Naomi met with Isabella, a renowned designer for celebrities. "I need a gown that makes anyone who sees me understand I belong at the very top of the room," Naomi said plainly. Isabella unveiled an emerald green silk gown, shimmering like liquid, sculpting Naomi's figure while radiating the authority she had built. On the day of the fitting, Ethan sat silently as Naomi stepped from the changing room. His breath caught, eyes glistening. "Naomi, you look like a queen." She smiled, twirling gently. "No, Ethan, I don't need to be a queen. I need to be my strongest version, only this time." As the family ate dinner that evening, Lila asked curiously, "Mama, where are we going that needs such a pretty dress?" Naomi brushed her daughter's curls. "We're going to a party, to remind some people that respect isn't a gift, it's what I deserve," Ethan added softly, yet firmly, "and to show you that our family never bows to injustice." Lila nodded, not understanding fully but sensing its weight. She grinned. "Then I need a pretty dress too." Naomi laughed, determination flickering in her eyes. "Of course, my princess." As the date drew near, Naomi felt her heartbeat quicken, but it wasn't fear like before. 3 years ago, she had walked out of the Whitmore estate with empty hands, thrust into darkness. Now, she would walk through another set of doors into confidence and triumph. She spent hours with the events team, fine-tuning every detail. White roses were shipped from California, soft golden lighting was used to bathe the ballroom, and a string orchestra was assembled from Houston's best. "We're not just hosting a party," Naomi told them. "We're building a stage, and on that stage, the truth will speak for itself." Ethan followed the plans closely, but never forgot his most important task, caring for Naomi and Lila. On nights Naomi worked late, shadows under her eyes. He brought her hot ginger tea, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to carry this alone. We're in it together." Even little Lila sensed the special atmosphere. She boasted at school, "My mama's going to wear a fancy dress to a big party, and I have my own dress too." Her innocence only fueled Naomi's resolve. This was not just her reappearance as a woman once trampled, but a life lesson she wanted etched into her daughter's heart. Dignity is never defined by others. Isabella perfected the gown on the weekend before the event, carefully pinning each fold. "Naomi, do you know?" Isabella said, voice trembling with awe. "I've never seen a woman wear one of my dresses and radiate such power. You don't just wear it, you make it live." Naomi smiled, eyes blazing. "I'm not afraid of their gaze anymore. From now on, they will see me as I am." That evening, Ethan surprised their daughter with a tiny emerald green gown, a miniature of Naomi's. When Lila tried it on, the house erupted in laughter. She spun before the mirror, squealing, "We're twin princesses." Naomi hugged her tight, tears streaming this time of joy. The night before the engagement, the family gathered in the living room. Ethan is on the sofa, Lila's head is on his shoulder, and Naomi's hand is on his. Soft jazz played under warm light. No one spoke of Preston or Madeline anymore. They focused on one thing. Tomorrow, they would not appear to seek approval, they would appear to assert truth. The morning dawned clear. Houston's skyline gleamed under the Sunday. Naomi sat still as the stylists pinned her hair into an elegant bun, crystals glittering like starlight. In the mirror, her reflection glowed radiant, firm, unrecognizable from the woman who had once wept alone beneath a chandelier. Lila burst in, eyes shining. "Mama, I'm ready." She spun in her mini-gown, ponytail bouncing, smile wide. Naomi took her hand, gazing at their reflection, mother and daughter, and felt the strength of generations bound together. When Naomi stepped into the living room, Ethan was straightening his tie. At the sight of her, he froze, eyes misting. "My God, Naomi, you're so breathtaking the world will have to stop and stare." He kissed her hand, then Lila's forehead. "The two queens of my life." They left in a black Bentley, gliding through Houston's bustling streets. Naomi looked out the window, her heart pounding not with dread, but with power. Tonight would be the turning point. Preston thought he held the reins, but she had everything. The Astoria Grand loomed ahead, dazzling beneath colossal chandeliers. Guests in finery streamed inside, laughter filling the air. Naomi squeezed Ethan's hand and glanced at Lila, seated between them, her eyes excitedly shining. "Are we ready?" Ethan murmured. Naomi drew a deep breath, her gaze alight, more than ever. The car door opened, flashbulbs exploded, and Naomi Carter Rodriguez stepped out in her emerald gown, with her husband and daughter at her side, ready to face the final battle with her past. That night, the Astoria Grand shone like a modern palace. Under the light of thousands of crystal chandeliers, Houston's most powerful figures gathered in the vast ballroom. Violins from a live string orchestra mingled with laughter and crystal glasses clinking. On stage, a backdrop embroidered in gold displayed two names, Preston and Madeline, a brazen proclamation of two families' combined power. Preston Whitmore III stood at the center of the room, champagne flute in hand, face glowing with triumph. He wore a finely tailored black tuxedo, his smile carefully rehearsed for each guest. Madeline Harrington gleamed in a silver-white gown at his side, a massive diamond flashing on her finger. Together, they looked victorious, convinced this night would cement their place as Houston's ruling union. "She'll come, won't she?" Madeline asked in a low voice, her eyes bright, but her tone venomous. "Of course," Preston smirked. Naomi never surrenders. She'll come, desperate to prove she's fine, and then everyone here will see her for what she is: pathetic, a shadow. He smiled smugly, blind to the truth already waiting to topple him. Outside, a sleek black Bentley pulled up to the red-carpeted entrance. Ethan stepped out first, tall and commanding in a classic tuxedo, calm eyes betraying not the slightest concern for the elite crowd inside. He circled back, opening the rear door. Naomi stepped out. The emerald gown hugged her form, glowing beneath camera flashes. Her hair was swept into an elegant bun, a few loose curls framing her face with effortless grace. The world seemed to stop instantly. She wasn't just another guest. She was the event. Then came Lila, in a miniature emerald dress, her tiny hand clasped in both parents' grips. Together, they formed a picture of completeness: the powerful woman, the steadfast man, and the radiant child. Whispers rippled through the foyer. "Is that Naomi Rodriguez? My God, she looks like a queen." Unbelievable, she was once Preston's ex-wife. Admiration, envy, shock, it all surged at once. The event coordinator's voice rang clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez, founders of Rodriguez Technologies, and their daughter, Lila." The ballroom fell silent. Dozens of heads turned. Naomi strode forward with her chin high, each step echoing across the marble like a victory drum. Ethan walked at her side, hand resting lightly on her back, his gaze fixed on her. Lila held both their hands, smiling brightly, a living symbol of a family Preston never had and never would. Across the room, Preston froze mid-toast. The glass in his hand stalled mid-air. His smile stiffened, his eyes flashing panic. Madeleine's grip on his arm tightened unconsciously. Naomi closed the distance, her expression serene but blazing. Just steps away, she smiled faintly, her voice carrying far enough for others to hear. "Hello, Preston. Lovely to see you again. And Madeleine, you look the same as 3 years ago." Madeleine's eyes flickered, her breath catching. In high society, unchanged was no compliment a blade, implying stagnation and irrelevance. Preston forced a laugh. "Naomi, I didn't expect you to come." Naomi lifted a champagne flute from a passing tray, raising it slightly. "Oh, why wouldn't I? After all, this party is mine, isn't it?" The words cracked like thunder. Murmurs surged instantly. Preston's face twisted, but Ethan extended a hand in cool courtesy before he could answer. "Preston, I'm Ethan Rodriguez. I imagine you've heard of my company." Preston's handshake was limp, sweat prickling at his neck. His mind spun. How is Naomi with him? Naomi slipped her arm through Ethan's, eyes sweeping the room calmly. In the glittering light, she was no longer the abandoned wife. She was a leader, a respected partner, a proud mother. And tonight, all of Houston would see it. The orchestra played on, but few listened. All eyes clung to Naomi and her family. Admiration glimmered, envy sharpened, but pity was gone. Naomi moved gracefully, her emerald gown shimmering like molten light. Ethan's face was solemn but glowing with pride, Lila's innocent laughter softening the air. "Is she Rodriguez's wife?" someone whispered. "No, they say she's the genius behind those AI breakthroughs." God. Preston threw away a prodigy for Harrington. The rumors spread like wildfire. Preston's chest tightened. Beside him, Madeleine lifted her chin, flaunting her diamond, but unease flickered in her eyes. Against Naomi's poise, Madeleine looked hollow luxury wrapped around emptiness. Guests began to drift toward Naomi, leaving Preston adrift in his celebration. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I read about your medical diagnostic system. Remarkable," a politician said, shaking her hand with respect. An investor leaned close. "We'd love to discuss a partnership on educational AI. Could we set a meeting?" Naomi smiled warmly, answering with ease. She didn't need to flaunt. Her very presence had shifted the room's gravity. Preston and Madeleine, though standing center stage, were being pushed to the margins, outsiders in their own night. Preston's grip on his glass turned his knuckles white. He muttered under his breath, "Impossible. How did she?" Madeline hissed back, "Stay calm. This is still our night. Don't let her take it." But even she knew the light had already shifted. At one corner, Lila ran to her mother, tugging her hand. "Mama, everyone's looking at us." Naomi knelt, smiling softly. "Let them look, darling, because tonight they'll remember the truth, not lies." The words carried, rippling through nearby guests, then spreading in hushed waves. Old whispers resurfaced the rumors of Naomi's abandonment while pregnant, the unfair prenup. Now, seeing her radiant, unshaken, the crowd silently chose sides. They knew who the coward was. A society columnist, Margaret Thornton, quickly typed notes into her phone. Instinct told her, tonight, Houston would wake to a scandalous headline. Naomi turned back to Preston, raising her glass slightly. "It's a beautiful party, Preston. Thank you for inviting me." Her tone was not mocking, but confident, victorious. Preston's lips trembled as he tried to form words. "Naomi, I didn't." Ethan's hand came to rest on Naomi's shoulder, his eyes locked on Preston, voice cutting like steel. "You're surprised because you never believed in real worth. But tonight, everyone here sees it." Silence thickened. Preston's mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time, he realized the shield of his family name meant nothing. Naomi hadn't just survived, she had soared beyond him. The music shifted to a slow, solemn piece. Naomi turned, extending her hand to Ethan. He smiled, leading her to the dance floor. From the sidelines, Lila perched with Mrs. Thompson. The guest Naomi had insisted on inviting clapped and cheered. "Mama, Daddy, dance." The room held its breath as Naomi and Ethan swayed to the music. No elaborate steps were needed. The way they looked at each other, steady and unbreakable, was enough to flood the ballroom with light. And in those eyes, the guests saw something Preston and Madeline could never buy with diamonds or names: love, steadfast and unshakable. At that moment, everyone understood. Naomi's entrance was not just a return, it was a coronation. When the music faded, the ballroom erupted in applause. Naomi and Ethan bowed lightly before returning to their table. Yet the atmosphere did not settle. Eyes still followed them, while Preston and Madeline strained across the room to maintain smiles that twitched at the edges. Margaret Thornton, Houston's sharpest society columnist, strode forward. "Mrs. Rodriguez," she said, voice sweet but gaze sharp as a scalpel, "I must admit, your appearance tonight exceeded all expectations. May I ask for a comment on your past relationship with Mr. Whitmore?" Naomi smiled serenely. "That relationship? It ended long ago, but it's fascinating, isn't it? How some people use power to bury the truth." The words lit a fire, whispers flared. Preston knew he had to seize control before Naomi steered the narrative. He hastily stepped forward, dragging Madeline with him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called loudly, "let's remember the purpose of tonight to celebrate the union of two esteemed families." But Naomi didn't let him. She rose, her voice steady yet carrying through the silence. "Esteemed? I wonder, can a man who forced his pregnant wife to sign divorce papers, leaving her with nothing, still be called esteemed?" Gasps swept the room. Guests turned, brows raised in shock. Preston's face blanched. Madeline's nails dug into his sleeve. "Naomi, this isn't the time," he stammered. "Not the time." Naomi lifted her chin, eyes blazing. "You invited me, Preston. You wanted me here to prove you'd won. But the truth is different. The truth is, you discarded the woman who saved your family from bankruptcy. My algorithms kept Whitmore Enterprises alive, and you called them meaningless. Then you threw me out for the sparkle of a diamond ring." The ballroom froze. Margaret Thornton raised her phone, recording, her eyes alight like a hunter spotting prey. A guest muttered, "Good God, I heard the rumors years ago, but I never thought—" Madeline flushed red, snapping, "Enough, Naomi. You're just making things up for attention." Naomi's smile thinned like a blade. "Making it up? Shall I show the patent filings I submitted before the divorce? Documents proving I first developed the AI platforms that are now used in healthcare, education, and climate research." Or should I remind everyone of the prenup you forced me into, stripping my child and me of all rights? A ripple of shock swept through the crowd. Some of Whitmore Enterprises' own partners frowned, casting Preston skeptical glances. Naomi pressed on, each word a hammer blow. You thought you'd won, Preston, but all you did was throw away a trillion-dollar opportunity. Rodriguez Technologies, the company my husband and I built, is now valued at over $200 billion. And it all began with the ideas you dismissed. The murmurs sharpened into audible gasps. Preston's face turned chalk white, sweat streaking his temple. He scanned the room, finding only cold stares where once there had been deference. Ethan placed a firm hand on Naomi's back, silent but strong. He didn't need words. His presence alone proved Naomi was no longer alone. She's lying, Preston burst out, his voice cracking. Whitmore Enterprises is still stable. Don't listen. Stable? Naomi cut him off, pulling a slim folder from her clutch. Here's Whitmore Enterprises' latest quarterly report. Revenues down 30%, stock plummeting for months. Meanwhile, Rodriguez Technologies just announced partnerships with the 3 largest hospitals in Texas. Who here wants to argue about stability? The whispers surged into a storm. Several VIPs quietly stepped aside, phones in hand, clearly texting their financial advisors. Preston swayed, the ground crumbling beneath him. Naomi's gaze locked on him, her tone low, sharp as steel. You thought tonight was your stage, but it's mine. I am no longer the woman who trembled over divorce papers. I am the one who built an empire, a family, and a future. And you? You're left with a ring and an illusion of power. The air thickened, heavy with judgment. Some guests discreetly left their tables, calling aides outside. Madeline's smile faltered, her hand gripping Preston's until her knuckles turned white. Naomi continued, voice calm but piercing. I don't say this for pity. I say it as a warning. Prejudice can make a family, company, or even a dynasty throw away its golden chance. Preston dismissed me because of where I came from, because of my skin, because he thought I didn't belong in his world. And that arrogance destroyed him. An elderly senator nodded gravely. Mrs. Rodriguez is right. Our society discards too much talent for the sin of being born in the wrong place. This is a wake-up call. Agreement rippled, growing into a wave. Preston's vision blurred. Allies he once counted on now turned away, their eyes cold, disdainful. His hand shook violently as he lifted his glass, wine spilling onto the marble. Madeline hissed, voice trembling, Preston, we need to leave, now. But Naomi wasn't finished. She stepped closer, her words slicing the silence. I forgive what you did to me, Preston. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let the past chain my future. But tonight, you will face the truth. Everyone here will know. I am not the abandoned woman. I am the one who rose, no matter how you tried to bury me. And I will never bow again. Applause cracked the silence. At first, a few hands, then more, until the entire ballroom rose. The thunder was not just for Naomi, but for the resilience of all who had ever been cast aside. Preston flinched as if struck. He opened his mouth, but the applause drowned him out. Madeline turned her face, tears spilling, realizing her glittering dream had shattered. Ethan stepped forward, taking Naomi's hand. His voice was low, steady. Let the past stay behind, my love. They've seen everything now. Naomi nodded gently. She bowed to the crowd, then guided her husband and daughter away from the spotlight. Words were no longer needed. The truth had spoken. Behind them, Preston stood rooted, his eyes dull. All his life, he had believed himself the master of the game. Now, he was nothing but the ruins of a name. Outside, the Houston night breeze carried the scent of roses from the Astoria Grand Gardens. Naomi inhaled deeply, freedom filling her lungs. Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Lila clasped her mother's hand tightly. See, Lila, Naomi said softly, the truth always has power, and no one gets to define you except you. Lila's eyes sparkled. I understand, Mama. I'll always hold my head high, just like you. Naomi smiled, tears of joy spilling. She knew tonight's confrontation was not just her triumph, It was a declaration for everyone who had ever been despised. They could rise, stronger, and shine brighter than ever. After the night at the Astoria Grand, Houston was shaken. Naomi's words didn't stay confined to that gilded ballroom. Within hours, social media exploded with recordings and clips shared by guests. Major headlines blared. Naomi Rodriguez, from abandoned wife to tech queen. Did Whitmore Enterprises lose a $1 trillion opportunity to prejudice? An engagement party turns into a public trial. Preston became a citywide laughingstock. Images of him sweating, stammering under Naomi's accusations, spread like wildfire. Meanwhile, Naomi's photo graced the cover of a leading business magazine, Eyes Bright, Smile Proud, captioned, "Intellect knows no class." Naomi was invited to speak at the Global Innovation Summit in New York. She stood before thousands of scientists, entrepreneurs, and policymakers worldwide for the first time in years. No longer a trembling young woman before scornful eyes, she stepped onto the stage in an ivory suit, voice carrying strong and clear. "I was not born into privilege," she began. "I am the daughter of a gardener and a housemaid. I was taught that knowledge is the one inheritance no one can strip away. But I also learned that society will sometimes reject you, not because you lack ability, but because they fear you don't belong." The hall fell utterly silent. She continued, "Years ago, my algorithms were dismissed as games. Today, they save patients' lives, bring education to underprivileged children, and help us predict climate change. I don't tell you this to praise myself. I tell it to remind us. Talent can bloom anywhere. Intelligence does not need lineage to prove itself. It only needs a chance." Thunderous applause erupted. Some rose to their feet, clapping until their hands reddened. Naomi bowed, eyes glistening. Meanwhile, Preston sat alone in his cavernous office at Whitmore Enterprises back in Houston. On his desk lay the latest report, stock in freefall, investors withdrawing en masse. Online, he was branded the man who abandoned a genius. Each headline sliced into his already shattered pride. Madeline hurled a newspaper onto his desk. "You've ruined us. You let her turn our engagement into a spectacle. Now the whole city laughs at us." Preston clutched his head, words failing him. Only one thought echoed, "I threw away an empire because I couldn't recognize its worth." By contrast, Naomi returned home weary but fulfilled. Ethan welcomed her into his arms, and Lila rushed up with shining eyes. "Mama, I saw you on TV. I'm so proud of you." Naomi hugged her tightly, whispering, every pain was worth it for this moment. Yet Naomi knew her intellectual legacy had only begun to surface. There was more drafts, unfinished ideas she had scribbled during lonely nights after her divorce. Now, it was time the world saw them. A week after New York, Naomi returned to Rodriguez Technologies. Her desk overflowed with invitations, partnerships, and investment offers, but her eyes were drawn only to a worn folder she had carried from that old apartment 3 years ago. Inside were handwritten notes, printed code snippets, and sketches of systems that later became the company's foundation. She placed it on the conference table before Ethan and her team. "This," she said steadily, "is the real legacy. It may look like a paper mess, but it holds the nights I spent coding while heavily pregnant. These ideas were never published, because back then, I had no power to protect them." A young engineer flipped through the pages, eyes wide. "Naomi, some of this is ahead of even our current systems. If we develop it further, it could create a new level of self-learning AI." Naomi nodded. "Exactly. It's time to bring it into the light. Not just to prove worth, but to show the world that knowledge cannot be buried by prejudice." News of the initiative spread swiftly. The media dubbed it Phoenix Protocol, a project reborn from ashes. The audience went still when Naomi unveiled it, standing beside a whiteboard with her original algorithms. They saw not only a scientist, but living proof of resilience. "These drafts were once dismissed as worthless," Naomi said. "But they endured, as I endured, despite denial. Today, they will become the foundation for solutions serving humanity, from patients in remote villages, children without schools, to communities facing climate disaster. Applause thundered, mingled with chants of her name. In Houston, Preston sat in darkness, watching the live broadcast. Naomi presented the algorithms he once mocked as meaningless games. He heard investors pledge billions to her company, and he knew what he had once scorned was now a treasure to the world. Madeline was gone, taking Harrington's family backing with her. Whitmore Enterprises now faced financial oversight and the shadow of bankruptcy. Preston whispered, trembling, "All of this could have been mine." But deep down, he knew it never was. For intellect cannot be owned by marriage, nor caged in gilded prisons. That night, Naomi returned home late. Lila ran into her arms. "Mama, I saw you on TV again. My friends say you're like a superhero." Naomi laughed softly, holding her tight. Ethan watched with quiet pride. "No, my love," Naomi said gently. "I'm not a superhero. I'm just someone who was once dismissed, but chose to rise. And you can too, whenever the world tells you you're not enough." She knew the Phoenix Protocol was more than technology. It was a message that knowledge, once planted, never dies. It may be buried, dismissed, scorned, but it will rise again, blazing unstoppable. That evening, as the family gathered at the dinner table, Naomi smiled with peace in her heart. The past had closed, but her intellectual legacy would live on not only in circuits and code, but in the spirit of future generations. And it began with Lila. 3 weeks after the engagement party turned into a public trial, Preston Whitmore III sat alone in the vast headquarters of Whitmore Enterprises. The once bright boardroom echoed only with the clatter of an old ceiling fan. Many employees had resigned. Others were laid off in desperate cost-cutting. Empty leather chairs lined the long table like the dynasty had abandoned him. On the desk lay blood-red financial reports. Shares had lost nearly half their value in just 2 weeks. Banks were tightening credit. Investors fled. Long-time partners cancelled contracts, citing loss of confidence in leadership. His phone buzzed relentlessly, but Preston didn't pick up. He knew who was calling the board, major shareholders. Even his father people who once hailed him as the golden heir are now seething with disappointment and rage. Online, his new nickname stuck like a scar. The man who abandoned a genius. Side by side, Naomi in her emerald gown entering the Astoria Grand with regal pride became an icon across media feeds, while Preston's photo, head down, sweat dripping, eyes dazed, was endlessly mocked. Madeline Harrington had vanished from their shared apartment, leaving only a note: "My family cannot remain tied to a man who destroyed an empire in one night. Do not look for me." No ring, no tears, just cold abandonment. Preston sat, drowning in bitterness. He remembered the night Naomi signed the divorce papers. He had thought he'd freed himself, chosen the surest path to power. Now, power, wealth, honor, everything had evaporated. The office door slammed open. Charles Whitmore II strode in, tall and broad, hair white but eyes sharp as steel. He hurled a folder onto the desk, voice like thunder. "What have you done to the Whitmore name? I built this empire my entire life, and you've reduced it to ashes with your arrogance." "Father, I couldn't have known Naomi. She—" "Enough," Charles roared. "Still, you don't understand. The problem isn't Naomi. It's you. You scorned her. You scorned intellect. You scorned real value. And now you pay the price." Preston could hardly breathe under the weight of his father's fury. "The board has voted," Charles continued coldly. "Effective today, you are no longer CEO. You are stripped of all leadership. Whitmore Enterprises will be sold. And listen carefully, the buyer is Rodriguez Technologies." Preston's heart nearly burst. "No, impossible. She bought our company." Charles nodded bitterly. "What you threw away, others valued. Naomi Rodriguez is not only the woman you abandoned, she is now the rightful heir to what you squandered. And you're nothing but a failure." He turned and left, leaving Preston ashen and hollow in his chair. He wanted to rage, to smash everything, but no strength remained, only emptiness. Meanwhile, Naomi signed the final acquisition papers at Rodriguez Technologies. Ethan clasped her hand. "You did it. You turned pain into power, and now you hold the company that once scorned you." Naomi smiled faintly, pride glowing beneath her calm. I didn't buy it for revenge. I bought it to prove that no one can decide another's worth. This isn't my victory alone, it's a lesson for society. The announcement of the takeover sent Houston's financial world into a frenzy. Headlines declared it a historic power shift. On live television, Naomi and Ethan signed beside their lawyers. Behind them, the Whitmore logo was replaced by a stylized phoenix, the new emblem of Rodriguez Technologies. Naomi spoke briefly, her voice sharp and resolute. This is not personal revenge. This is a strategic step to rescue a company with once great potential, destroyed by arrogance and prejudice. We commit to restructuring, creating sustainable jobs, and making Whitmore a symbol of innovation and social responsibility. Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. In that moment, Naomi wasn't just a businesswoman, she embodied justice restored. Across town, Preston sat in a shabby rented apartment. The peeling walls, the cheap furniture, a far cry from the mansions he once knew. Naomi's radiant face filled the screen on the TV, smiling as the world applauded. He hurled the remote at the wall, but it didn't matter, the image burned inside him. His phone rang. Reluctantly, he answered. A lawyer's voice came through. Mr. Whitmore, with your current finances, you no longer hold meaningful shares. To avoid personal bankruptcy, we recommend accepting the reintegration program Rodriguez Technologies has offered. Preston froze. Reintegration program? For him, the once-groomed Prince of Houston? The thought made him sick. Yet reality left him no choice. He would never forget the first day he walked into the building that once bore his family's name, now branded Rodriguez Technologies. Former employees eyed him with a mix of pity and disdain. The new manager handed him a badge. Customer Relations Assistant. A modest role. No privileges. No prestige. Naomi never appeared. She chose instead to let him live what she had endured, smallness. Yet she didn't cast him out entirely. She once said, "Forgiveness is not for the offender, it is for oneself." Preston sat in an open office, the sound of keyboards clicking all around. The world surged forward, leaving him behind. He remembered the glittering parties and the center stage he once commanded. Now, he was only a name tied to failure. One late afternoon, as he slunk out of the building, he saw Naomi exiting a conference room with Ethan. She looked tired, but radiant with pride. Preston opened his mouth, but Naomi only glanced at him, no anger, no pity, just calm finality. "Good luck, Preston," she said softly, and walked away, hand in hand with her husband. He stood frozen, throat tight. That was the sharpest cut, not hatred, but indifference. Naomi had moved beyond him, while he remained trapped in his arrogance. Preston sat alone in his dingy apartment that night, staring into a glass of cheap liquor. Naomi's words from the signing ceremony echoed in his head. This is not personal revenge, and for the first time in his life, Preston faced the truth. He had destroyed himself, not anyone else. Autumn came to Houston with calm winds and golden leaves lining the streets. 3 months had passed since Rodriguez Technologies completed the takeover of Whitmore Enterprises. Naomi's schedule was relentless. Trips to Washington to discuss AI education projects and California to sign medical research partnerships. Yet every time she returned home, she hugged Lila tightly, breathing in the sweet scent of her daughter's hair, a reminder that all glory meant nothing without family. One afternoon, Naomi received unexpected news from HR. Preston, after being demoted, hadn't quit. Instead, he came in regularly, performing mundane tasks, sorting customer files, organizing paperwork. At first, employees mocked him, treating him as a joke. But slowly, they noticed he no longer boasted or strutted. He worked diligently, often staying late to finish tasks. That evening on the balcony, Naomi told Ethan. He sipped his wine and nodded. "Maybe he's finally learning what real work means. But you don't have to care, Naomi. He's no longer part of your life." Naomi gazed at the city lights. "I know, but part of me thinks, if he really changes, maybe Lila deserves to know her biological father isn't entirely a monster. I don't want her childhood defined only by betrayal." Ethan rested his hand over hers, gentle but firm. "I understand, but remember, Forgiveness doesn't mean letting him back in to destroy again. Forgiveness should only be a chance for him to prove his worth. A few days later, Naomi decided to see for herself. She visited the old office where Preston now worked. He looked up, startled. Gone were the tailored suits, he wore a plain shirt, and ink stains were on his fingers. He looked worn, humbled. "Naomi," he stammered, rising. "Sit down," she said evenly. He obeyed awkwardly. Naomi held his gaze. "I hear you've been working seriously. I'm not here to revisit the past. I want to know, are you truly trying to change, or is this another performance?" Preston lowered his head, silent for a long time, then sighed. "For the first time in my life, I'm doing work nobody notices. For the first time, I take orders, and I realized I've never achieved anything on my own. I lived off the Whitmore name, off arrogance, and the price was losing everything." Naomi crossed her arms, eyes sharp. "Do you think a few months are enough to redeem what you did to me and my daughter?" His voice cracked. "No, it'll never be enough. I don't expect forgiveness. I only want a small chance to prove I'm not entirely worthless. If I can do even one useful thing, however small, I want to try." Naomi was silent for a long time. At last, she said slowly, "You'll never regain what you lost. But if you truly want to change, prove it. Not to me, but to my daughter. Lila deserves better memories of her father. But you'll have to earn that yourself." Preston nodded, eyes red. For the first time, he doesn't see Naomi as an enemy, but as a mirror reflecting every life mistake, and maybe as his last chance to begin again. From then on, his change grew clearer. Formerly mocking colleagues now admitted it. The arrogant ex-CEO was patiently manning the photocopier, carefully filing documents, learning data entry, even fetching coffee for the team without complaint. When the company launched a rural school project, Preston volunteered to join. Under the harsh Texas sun, he hauled equipment, set up computers, and sweat, soaking his shirt. One volunteer, surprised, asked, "You were once CEO of a big company. Why are you doing this?" Preston gave a wry smile. "Maybe this is my first time working with my hands." When Naomi heard, she said nothing, but her heart stirred. Change doesn't happen overnight. Yet watching Preston slowly learn humility, she realized that people can fall but can also stand up if they face their own darkness. One evening, as the family dined together, Lila suddenly asked, "Mama, do I have another dad? My friends say I look like Daddy Ethan, but I want to know the truth." Naomi and Ethan exchanged glances. Silence lingered. Then Naomi gently said, "Yes, love, you were born to another man, but he didn't know how to cherish you. Daddy Ethan chose you, he chose to love you as his own. That's what matters most." Lila tilted her head, thinking, "But if that man says sorry, can I meet him?" Naomi froze. Ethan squeezed her hand, urging her not to rush. Finally, Naomi said softly, "If you want to meet him one day, and if you're ready, Mama will be by your side. But remember, you get to choose. No one can force you." That night, Naomi lay awake. Lila's innocent question pierced deep, the fear her daughter would grow up scarred by her origins. And Naomi realized that if she wanted Lila to heal, she had to learn forgiveness. Not to let Preston back in, but to give Lila the chance to see her father beyond contempt. Weeks later, Naomi arranged a quiet cafe meeting with Preston and brought Lila. He entered awkwardly, dressed plainly, nerves in every step. Lila's eyes widened. Naomi introduced calmly, "Lila, this is your biological father." Silence hung for a moment. Then Lila asked bluntly, her voice pure but serious, "Why did you leave Mama and me?" The question stabbed straight into Preston's chest. He bowed his head, voice shaking. "Because I was foolish. I thought money and status mattered more. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness. I hope for a chance to show you I'm trying to improve." Lila stayed quiet, then glanced at her mother. Naomi laid a hand on her shoulder and nodded. Turning back, Lila said softly, "I don't know if I can forgive yet, but I'll wait and see what you do." Preston's eyes brimmed. He knew he had just received the rarest gift, not forgiveness, but a chance. Naomi watched, emotions swirling. She hadn't forgotten the wounds, but she knew. Forgiveness isn't erasure, it's release. Release for herself, her daughter, and perhaps for Preston too. That night, Ethan wrapped her in his arms. You did what few could. You opened the door to forgiveness. Naomi rested against him, whispering, not because Preston deserves it, but because Lila deserves a world where hope and change are real. Spring arrived in Houston with cherry blossoms imported from Washington, planted along the Central Park as a symbol of renewal. Naomi woke in her suburban villa, sunlight streaming through glass windows, scattering golden light across the walls. From the backyard came Lila's laughter as she ran with the little puppy Ethan had given her. Naomi stood by the window, hand resting on her belly where her second child was growing. She smiled, a peace deep within her chest. From an abandoned woman, she now had everything: a loving family, a thriving career, and most importantly, the freedom to live by her true worth. In the kitchen, Ethan was fussing over breakfast. Sleeves rolled up, he clumsily flipped eggs while whistling a cheerful tune. When Naomi entered, he turned, grinning widely. "Good morning, my queen." She laughed, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "Do you know how many times you've called me that?" "Not nearly enough," he answered, kissing her forehead. In that simple moment, Naomi understood happiness wasn't born of grand promises but of steady presence and small daily gestures. Ethan had given her what Preston never could: the truth that love is partnership, not control. That afternoon, Naomi attended the inauguration of Phoenix House, a community tech center funded by Rodriguez Technologies. It was built in the poor neighborhood where Naomi had grown up. Inside were computer labs, skilled classrooms, and open research spaces for youth. When Naomi took the stage, the crowd roared. She scanned the eager faces, young, hopeful. To her, they were mirrors of her younger self, once desperate for opportunity but stifled by prejudice. "Phoenix House is not just a building," Naomi declared, voice full of emotion. "It's a message. Intelligence can be born anywhere. You don't need anyone's permission to dream big. Let your dreams blaze, because the world needs your light." Thunderous applause followed. Children shouted, "Miss Naomi, we want to be scientists like you." She laughed, eyes brimming with tears. In the front row, Ethan and Lila beamed with pride. Farther back sat Preston, silent, unnoticed. Months of humble work had brought him here as an event staffer. When Naomi's eyes found him, she only nodded, no bitterness, just quiet acknowledgement. Preston lowered his head, gratitude and regret mingling in his gaze. After the event, Naomi sat with her family that evening under a large tree in the park. Lila lay with her head on her mother's lap, half asleep. Ethan held Naomi's hand. "I've been thinking about all we've been through," he said softly, "and I realize the greatest miracle isn't billion-dollar contracts or titles. It's that we built happiness out of ruin." Naomi leaned against him, eyes on the blazing sunset. "Yes. I once thought my life ended the day I signed the divorce papers, but it was only the beginning of the journey to find my true self." The sun dipped, flooding the Houston sky with fiery orange. Naomi knew this wasn't just another day, but a new era. She was no longer a victim, but a creator. Months later, Time magazine's cover featured Naomi in a simple white dress, holding Lila's hand, the Phoenix logo glowing behind them. The headline read, "The Woman Redefining Power in America." The article traced her journey from abandoned wife to tech visionary, ending with her words, "I don't seek revenge. I seek to make this world fairer for my daughter and every child like her." Her influence stretched far beyond business. Universities began teaching the Naomi case in leadership courses as proof of how prejudice buries talent and the power of recognizing ability over pedigree. Non-profits invited her to speak, inspiring women and minorities to pursue science despite barriers. Through it all, Ethan remained her steady anchor, never competing, never jealous, only lifting her higher. When asked about her secret to interview success, Naomi often answered, "Because I had a partner who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself." One summer evening, the family gathered for a backyard barbecue. Lila darted around with neighborhood friends, While Naomi rested on the swing chair, hand over her round belly, Preston appeared at the gate, carrying a small box. He hesitated. I came to thank you, and to say goodbye. I've requested a transfer to the Dallas branch. It's better for everyone if I start over elsewhere. Naomi studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Perhaps that's right. The past will always remain, but you can choose to live differently from here. I hope you truly do. Before leaving, Preston bent toward Lila. One day, I'll try to be someone you can be proud of. Lila only nodded silently, but her eyes were softer than when they first met. When he disappeared into the night, Ethan wrapped his arms around Naomi. Do you regret opening the door to him? She shook her head. No. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it frees the present. And that's how we can build the future. That night, as Houston's skyline glittered like artificial stars, Naomi stood on the balcony. No longer weighed down by anger, she carried only faith in the path ahead. A month later, she gave birth to a baby boy. Ethan held her hand in the delivery room, tears falling at the sound of their son's first cry. Naomi cradled him against her chest, whispering, "Welcome to this world. You were born of love, resilience, and the belief that every wound can become strength." The news spread quickly, but Naomi declined interviews. She wanted this moment untouched. No cameras, no lights, just pure warmth. A year later, at a graduation ceremony for Phoenix House students, Naomi was invited to speak. Looking out at the rows of young faces, many of whom had once thought they had no future, now wearing green gowns, she said, "I once believed I was invisible, that I was unworthy. But I learned something. No one else decides our value. Only we do. Go and show the world that intelligence, compassion, and resilience can never be buried." Applause thundered like a storm. In that instant, Naomi knew her journey had transcended herself. It had become a legacy. That night, she returned home, her son in her arms, Lila chattering about school, and Ethan smiling quietly beside her. Moonlight bathed the garden, jasmine scent drifting in the breeze. Naomi whispered, almost to herself, "This is my new dawn. No shadow can ever eclipse it." And she knew with certainty from here, her family and the world they were helping to shape would continue to shine. Proof that love and intelligence could triumph over every prejudice.